You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So in Loris's introduction, she talked about how I have 20 years of experience in corrections. So to prove that point, I had to shave my head to show that if I have no hair, it means I've been in the industry for a bit longer. Florence started off with a story. So I decided that I should also start with a story. Because in the end of it, if I reach the half an hour, you get the slides, you can read the slides. We all walk away with stories, and we talk a lot about in the past 2 days about addiction, right? And as I looked across the room, I met some of you all at CNB. Each one of us has a story about addiction, and some of us here, or many of us here even struggle with addiction. The addiction need not be about drugs. Right, so like what Florence started off, she's here for very selfish reasons. Because my boss is here, I must say that, no, I'm here because my organization sent me here. But in truth, I too am here for a selfish reason, right? So what's my story about drugs? I've been in corrections for a long time. I worked with drug offenders for a good number of years. I worked in a youth center, and I used to run a youth center for young drug offenders. But that's not my story. My story is that I got a very good friend whom I lost in contact with, and I eventually found him in the drug rehabilitation center because he was caught abusing cannabis at the time. I remember at the time when he was caught, he was also diagnosed with HIV. So the superintendent of that center itself called me just by chance. Dom, can you come and speak to this guy? He obviously he was arrested for drugs, but because he found out he was HIV positive, he wanted to tell his partner that he's HIV positive and that his partner should also be tested. So there I went and I met him. When I saw him, I recognized him because he was my long lost friend for over 20 years, right? And hearing his story about why he turned to drugs was quite a horrible experience, right? No one accepted him. He was dealing with being gay. How the family, who was very traditional Chinese family itself, wouldn't accept him, right? His mother's schizophrenic, and so no one accepted him, and therefore drugs was an outlet at how he managed that, right? So it sounded like a good story, right? We reunited, and then I wish it was a simple happy ever after. So he left the center years later itself. And I remember getting a call from his partner many years later, right? And he says, Dom, can you come? I think your friend overdosed. Sorry, my boss has never heard the story yet, in case you don't know that. And so I didn't skip work. I took leave, and I went to the home. Fortunately, he survived. I was there as the ambulance was there picking him up and bringing him to the hospital itself, right? And that's a good experience, a good outcome. Today, several years later, he remains drug-free. That's one. And number two, he was there at my wedding and he did the flowers for my wedding. Yeah. Second story is this. A few years ago, my own nephew itself, was in a drug rehabilitation center, right? And he struggled not just with drugs, but it started off because he was diagnosed with autism, right? So there is a relation between mental illness and drugs, and that's a topic that has not been discussed very much in the past 2 days. But there's a correlation, right? Because he had autism, he felt that people didn't understand him, and till this day, he still thinks that no one understands him, right? He grappled with attempting to take his life a few times, and drugs was his mode of escape. Yeah. So that's the narrative of why I'm here. I'm here to learn from experts, the knowledge, but also the experience at which you have undertaken. Because each one of us has a story to tell. Each one of us has an experience, right? The question is how do we move forward from here? When Renee invited us, actually it was meant to be a Southeast Asian sharing. I was supposed to partner with Tony to do a presentation. Tony was in the Oval Council, right, was supposed to be the point lead of the presentation. Of course, while I'm at CND, Tony tells me, oh, Dom, I can't come. You've got to figure this one out yourself. So that, dear Renee, do I need to come anymore or can I go home at Singapore? So Renee very kindly says, Dom, don't worry, come and present. And then we're going, what story do you want me to tell? So this is a kind of last minute deck that I hatched together. And I know the narrative was, how do we collaborate in the community at a local level and at an international level of how Sana exists? Well, you get part of this and you get a lot more. I think you need to understand the context of Sana and where we exist, how we exist, which is a slightly different story from your own jurisdiction itself. So I hope you draw parallels to this, and please ask me as much as you want. If I cannot answer, my colleagues are here. All right. So we're not a new organization. We were established in 1972, right? In the 1970s, I would think most of you all were around at the time, right? Because I'm not born at this time.
Careful.
I know. So in 1970s, right, opium and heroin was what was very active in Singapore itself. And the government at the time was the one that looked at formalizing a whole unit that focused on narcotics and enforcement itself, right? But concurrently, around the same time, there was a whole movement to see how community support for drug offending could come about. And that's how the born of Sana came about, right? You know what ECOSOC is, right? So we gained ECOSOC in 2018, which allows us the opportunity to present and to talk at different platforms. To understand a bit about Sana, really our mission is to educate the community about the harms of drug abuse, to support the person's recovery, and of course to advocate for drug-free society. Advocate for drug-free society. Yeah. That one line was why Renee invited us, right? So actually, what do we do? If we have to break down the pillars, there are 4 main things we do. We look into aftercare. We have centers in the community itself where people can walk in for help. We do quite a fair bit of community engagement. We do work with the schools, right, on preventive drug work and outreach and advocacy. Supporting that, of course, there's a whole growth towards technology, digitalization, working with volunteers, doing research, doing data analytics. I must say, my background is not in sociology, not in counseling, not in psychology. I'm an engineer by training, right? And so is Ling Chu actually. So both of us engineers by training. And the odd thing is, we're both civil engineers. So the question is, what the heck are we doing in this realm of work? Right? Wayne Chu says, I have the ability to bullshit quite a fair bit, so that's why I'm here. But I choose a slightly different narrative, right? I practiced engineering while I was in university. I worked on building buildings and skyscrapers, right? And that didn't satisfy me, right? I wanted a job I wanted a role, a vocation, better. I wanted a vocation that rebuilds lives and not rebuild buildings. And I see that commonality in everyone in this room, right? Some are NGOs, some are private, right? Right? So, but in essence, we all have a common mission. So one of Renee's point to me is this: how does the community in Singapore band together? Which is a different narrative for each one of you, right? I just want to draw attention to this particular diagram, right? Very simple as it is, but steeped in a lot of meaning. This one simple diagram explains the public-private partnership that happens with helping ex-offenders in Singapore itself. Not just drug offenders, drug addicts in recovery, but all ex-offenders. Anyone that has left a drug rehabilitation center, any offender that's left prison itself, this is the model that worked, right? This model is 25 years old. 25 years old. We celebrate our silver anniversary this year. right? So it's called the CARE Network, Community Action for the Rehabilitation of Ex-Offenders. In Singapore, if you realize we love acronyms, I don't remember half of them, so I remember the acronym, but I don't know what it stands for, right? But that's the CARE Network. So CARE Network is made up of public organizations, public agencies, the government, right? As well as NGOs, right? This is not some arranged marriage that worked perfectly and everything. Over 25 years, there have been tons of fights. So I just want to answer a question that Michael asked Wenchu separately over lunch. Are we linked to the government? Loosely, in this manner, we have a lot of interactions with the government. And you ask me, that is an important ingredient of why some things work in Singapore. Because we are able to have that conversations with the government, right? I remember a conversation I had with SA yesterday, right? How do we work with the government? And SA says, hey, you get the guidelines, then you go and ask the government, you know, we need this thing. And to some extent what you're saying is true, right? We need to hold the government or the respective agencies to the accountability of what is signed itself. The difference is, in areas that we detect that there may be conflict or non-compliance, I think that there is a framework, there is a modality in which we can engage the government. And the government does listen to us. Right? The government does listen to us. Right? So I just want to stress a bit about this. Every agency in this list, so every logo represents an agency itself, has a different purpose. Right? For some of them, is to provide training to offenders, to ex-offenders, provide jobs, provide befriending, support families. Every agency has a role to play. Are there overlapping of roles? Definitely. Is there conflict about, you know, hey, this is my area, where is that? Of course! I look across the room, many of you are married, right? Okay. Yes. I assume many of you are still married, right? Right? I want to say happily married, but I'm scared to ask the question. I look at Gary. Yeah. So imagine you have, okay, I presume you have one partner, right? In my friend Kalam, who's a Muslim, you know, in Islam you can have 5 wives, right? Sorry, 4 wives. Four wives. SA is so knowledgeable on this area. He's gonna convert. I see. So imagine if you have like 9, 10 wives down here. Right? So it is complicated. but there is an element of collaboration. There is an element of understanding, and it's taken 25 years to do, to be honest. I shared this model in Hong Kong recently when I went to meet with some counterparts in Hong Kong, and they said, "Hey, I want to do something with the government, right?" So for those who are a bit more familiar with China politics, so there's China, there is Hong Kong, then there's Macau. One China. So in case I'm recorded or posted, one China policy, right? Yes. So please don't record that. But you do realize that there are differences within there. So I'll share my counterparts with Hong Kong about this model, right? And they are taking a serious look at this. And they asked me this question, Dom, what is how did it get started? I said the very first step is really finding who are your key partners. Who do you want to work with and having that traction out. Because it's not going to start easy. When this started, I can honestly tell you, many agencies didn't believe. They go like, hey, why are you stepping into my territory? Right? But you shared in your presentation earlier, you talked about how it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes a village to help a person in recovery. Right? If it doesn't, why are we in this room and not downstairs having a beer? I'm sorry. Right? There's a purpose. We need to band together. Right? And for years, the Singapore model has been working very insular. Let's look within us, these agencies itself. Why is Sana here? Okay, apart from the fact that Wenchu wants us to be here, but let's say it's because the collaboration cannot just remain within a single country. The collaboration needs to extend to the greater purpose. Can you move faster before you show me the flags? So I mentioned earlier, we have centers around Singapore itself. I mean, you can read this part, right? Can, right? And move on. These are the services at which we run from our step-up centers itself. I think quite self-explanatory. I'll cover some of them in greater detail. Don't take pictures, please, because my government will ask me why I'm taking pictures. Just read pictures. Okay, so we have psychotherapy, we have support groups, we have family support groups itself. Quite self-explanatory. You get the slides, you can read them later. Right? The social aspect of it is important. It's not just about talking about drugs, but it's also about having the element of release, of enjoying social activities together with their family, which is what celebration is about, which is what pro-social recreation activities is about. One key activity we do that we support is the thing called tattoo removal, right? Exactly, good. Why?
Because tattoos are...
Tattoos have two purposes. The very first one is, many of them are young, and when they're young, they do tattoos that are really ugly. They're not the I love mom tattoos, come on, seriously speaking, right? But many of them tattoo their faces, tattoo their limbs, right? Which is visible, and it makes it a lot harder for them to gain employment if they have visible tattoos, right? These are not these nice tribal tattoos you see in Australia. They're not, right? Yeah. So they're, by helping them remove these tattoos itself, they have a better chance of getting employment. The second reason, many of these young people, when they start doing tattoos, these tattoos have gang inclinations, right? And if they want to step away from drugs, they need to step away from the gangs. And by removing them, it is a sign that they really want to turn their life around and they want to start anew. And that's why we want to support them. Right? So how does this work? The tattoo removal is the person in recovery pays a small fraction, 25 Singapore dollars, 10 euros, right? And that covers the medication, the antibiotic cream and everything. The rest of the cost is absorbed either by SANA or a partner agency that does tattoo removal. And these are clinic, these are real doctors, aesthetic doctors. You know, the ones that take a lot of money after doing your tattoos and your implants and you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Plastic surgeons, very good. The other thing that Renee asked me to speak about is actually this thing called the Yellow Ribbon Community Project. Okay, she did ask me to speak about Yellow Ribbon Community Project, but in particular, it's about the philosophy behind it. Now, the Yellow Ribbon Community Project is it's a project that gave birth from the CAN network. So earlier, I showed you about all the different logos and CAN network. So from that came about this Yellow Ribbon Community Project. So earlier, we talked about how it takes a village, entire village, to help a person in recovery. But our interest is not just the person in recovery, right? Our interest is the family. Because we've been talking quite a fair bit. When a person takes drugs, abuses drugs, right? Who suffers? The family. Correct. And Article 33 says the children suffer, right?
Yeah.
So the Yellow Ribbon Community Project aims to first and foremost help the families, help the children. You take someone who's arrested for drugs, you put him in a recovery center. In our terms, in Singapore, it's called a drug rehabilitation center itself. What happens to the family?
Suffer.
It suffers, right? What if we've taken away the breadwinner? Exactly. So there is a need for the community to come in to support the family. Many years ago, right, when I still had hair, there were stories that I heard from my seniors, right, that when a person is taken away to prison or to a drug rehabilitation center, the child dies. Because why? The enforcement needs to, oh yes, okay, yes. Actually, let's not look at the way that the enforcement officer is primarily interested in executing justice, right? Takes him away. Who knows about the child that's left neglected at home? Nobody knows. So that must change. One death is way too many. And that gave birth to the Delivering Community Project, where the community, right, led by the Member of Parliament, right, comes in and supports his own community. So how this works is, when a person enters the prison or drug rehabilitation center itself, he gives consent for the community to contact his family. So the community members in the committee goes out, either contacts, calls, or visits the family to see what help is required. Could be that there's no money, they need financial assistance. Could be they have arrears in their bill, no one to pay. Could be they just need a listening ear. Right? So these are the social help that the community must come in to support while we work on the personal recovery. Right?
That's good.
So Florence earlier talked about working with young people and her simple message of think, right? So I give you different, I give you act. After you think, you act.
Yes.
So
That's
the youth is our future. Sounds very cliche, right? Okay, I can say that now because I'm no longer youth. A lot of our focus in Sana really is about working with youth. We have schemes, so it's about working drug awareness with schools, working with young student leaders itself, working with uniform groups. I think uniform groups are not unfamiliar to you. In Europe, you have the Scouts, the Guides, you have, right? So we partner the uniform groups in Singapore. And you know how the Guides have these little badges? So one of those badges is the Sana badge. So if you do some drug awareness program with us, at the different levels, you advocate among your peers, they give you a badge if you achieve a certain amount of tasks. Yeah. So that's how we get youth advocacy. Talking about advocacy, earlier we were just talking about reaching out to youth, right? We're talking about reaching out to youth and TikTok itself. If you go to, I should probably say this, if you go to our Sana TikTok, we launch a new TikTok every 2 days. Okay. I don't have a TikTok account.
Irony.
Yeah, I don't have. So I have to go in. But I realized that you need to connect with them. A lot of what Flora shared earlier, you need to connect to them. And you have to reach out at their level. And working with youth, tell them, hey, drugs are bad for you. Come on. You don't know that. Okay, I hope you do know this, and maybe Lucas can affirm this position. If you open a TikTok, how many seconds do I have to catch your view, catch your interest?
On TikTok, what I could imagine it is less than 10 seconds.
The answer is you have 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? I know, your son
What
doesn't know
was the
TikTok.
name of it? What was the name of the TikTok? Sana. What was your name on the TikTok?
I will give it to you later.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, you have 3 seconds. Come on, 3 seconds, right? If your 3 seconds is an old fogey like me saying, drugs are really bad for you, I won't even last a second. So we had to transform the way we do content on TikTok. But every 2 days, we try to launch something out, such that we try to get youth attention. A lot of it is based on youth. Some of it, you see, it's seemingly bullshit. It's just funny humor. It's a draw traffic. Some of it has very subtle messaging itself. And the irony of it, do you know where I learned this from?
The youth.
No. I first learned this idea from the Singapore Police Force. Right? And the Singapore Civil Defense. Because they have transformed the way they do TikTok. Imagine, okay, I mean, my body is a bit like firemen, right? So, you didn't get the joke. So the firemen in Singapore come out with these interesting TikTok videos to get people about fire safety. The police, men and women, use TikTok to reach out and talk about crime and crime prevention itself. So I use my beautiful body, just like the firemen, Okay, 2 jokes, good. To talk about drugs, right? And hopefully in a way that appeals to youth. So like Renee was asking us, hey, we should connect with people in Indonesia, right? You have a social media team in Indonesia that's looking at this, and I think we want to find new ways of reaching out to youth. Of course, you need to use youth to create content for youth. So a lot of what we do is using influencers. Influencers at which they know. So like if I go to school and talk to them, they go like, hey, who's this botak or say bald-headed gentleman down here, right? But if you bring the influencer that they recognize, they listen. So we travel around. It's no secret. We want to be able to reach out to the international community. That's a growth area which Sana is looking at. So I mean, not new, right? WFAD, VNGOC, all these are things that I think the audience here is familiar with. Okay, this is what Renee asked me to talk about. I mean, one slide on what you must do. So I'm being obedient to you. What I want to share is something that's technically not ready for sharing, but at Renee's request, I'm sharing this. Over the past 1 year, Sana has been looking at uniting NGOs, similar like-minded NGOs in the Asia Pacific region, right? We haven't gotten to Australia, but we've spoken to Gary, Shane. We will get to Australia. That we want to be able to create that voice among the NGO space. Right? WFAD has presence in Asia Pacific itself, but and Oceania. So we've linked up with Rima, and we've also linked up with Diana Joseph. Ayo, got another warning letter already. Okay. But I think that Asia itself is a unique animal, unique entity itself. We're a lot more quiet. If you guys come talk to us, we're a bit more non-vocal, right? But we have our own bullshit now, as you hear from me now, right? So we've been trying to form. We've been trying to form a coalition, for lack of a better term itself, of like-minded NGOs to come together, and this is the strategic intent of our coalition, right? Officially, we launched in May, so please don't go up and share this yet, because it's not gone to the press, it will go to the media, and I think we just don't want to let it out of the bag at this juncture in time. So we're launching it in May at a conference at which Sana is organizing, and we really see a value of us coming together itself. Then probably you will see the coalition speak at CMD next year. Yeah. And do come and join us for those who are doing CMD next year. So talk about volunteers. Volunteers are the heart of your organization, right? And volunteers are the heart of our organization. Sana alone, our staff itself, is not big, cannot do everything. So we depend on a lot of our volunteers. One of the key group of volunteers are our persons in recovery. Right? So I've worked in corrections for many years, but speaking to a person who is recovering, my words are less effective than someone who has undergone that same journey. And so we work with a lot of our peers, and we want to celebrate their success. Right? For those who have recovered, right? I shall not cheer because I was one yesterday. Don't cheer, right? It is not a linear journey. It's one where it's very iterative. There are many falls, and sometimes you are fortunate to have good support, good agency support, good family support, good religion support, right? And that's what I've heard over the past few days. But some of them don't. So at the very least, we want to be able to provide people who have gone through that journey itself. And that's why we work a lot of them. We work with a lot of them who have recovered, who are still in recovery, but who have remained drug-free for a protracted period of time. A lot of what we talked about today by Stefan, by David, is about data, right? I'm sorry, but the NGO space doesn't seem to be very strong in data collection. Because I remember she was asking me, do you have this data? Do you have this data? Do you have this data? And obviously Gary does research in data. I'm worried about your hands, sorry. And we're beginning to collect data. Right? We want to look at data, we want to analyze data, we want to do research based data itself. And of course, we're looking for collaborators. Correct?
Yeah.
As a hint.
Yep.
Good man.
Actually, before I left prisons, my last role actually was in corrections. My last role was in technology. Right? I'm a tech idiot that does not have a TikTok account, does not have an IG account, Instagram account, but I did a lot of work on digitalization. A lot of the services that we render to people that we want to help has to be digital. Right?
Good.
And so we need to be able to go digital. You can't just have a website or a Facebook account. That ain't gonna work. For those who still have Facebook, I'm sorry, Facebook is dead. It's only used by... I didn't say those words. I have been warned by Shane. I cannot use those words. But Facebook alone is insufficient.
Yes.
The demographics of the people that use drugs in Singapore or who are recovering, I have the very young, and I also have the older generation, which is why Facebook still works for us, right? But it depends on the group that you're trying to reach out to. If you want to get to the oldish generation, then yes, through Facebook, through your website itself. But if you want to get to a very young, then you need to think of an alternative, which is generally in our case, TikTok. Okay. So then, even engaging volunteers. In the past, we used to have volunteers down, do these briefings, they travel all the way down. Singapore is small. If you think about it, in Netherlands, it's like everybody sit down in a room for half a day and do. No, everything is virtual, right? So we want to leverage on technology, and even the NGO space should be able to leverage on technology. The good thing about it is civil society organizations in Singapore itself, as a whole, want to move towards a more digitalized environment, and there are a lot of funding support for CSOs in Singapore to grow technology, to try new things itself, because it is going to be a different era that we're going to operate. Florence had a quote earlier, right? So I felt really jealous. I also wanted to end with a quote. We cannot do all the good that this world needs, but this world needs all the good that we can do.
Cool.